$3. That's what her life was worth now. Clara Whitmore pressed her youngest daughter against her chest and watched the crowd laugh. 5 children clung to her threadbare skirt in that freezing saloon, and not a single man would meet her eyes. Damaged goods, someone muttered. Too many mouths. She'd sold everything, her wedding ring, her mother's Bible, her dignity, and still nobody wanted her. Then the door opened, and a stranger walked in from the snow. Stay with me until the end of this story and comment which city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The saloon in Bitter Creek smelled like tobacco whiskey and desperation. Clara stood on a wooden platform that creaked under her weight, holding 3-year-old Lily so tight the child whimpered. "Mama," Sarah whispered from behind her. At 14, her eldest daughter understood exactly what was happening. "Mama, they're all leaving." Clara didn't answer. She watched another man shake his head and push through the crowd toward the door. That made 7. 7 men who'd taken one look at her and her 5 children and decided they'd rather face a Wyoming winter alone. "Now, gentlemen," the auctioneer called out, his voice losing enthusiasm with every word. "Mrs. Clara Whitmore here is an educated woman. Can read, write to figures. She's got experience running a household and running it into the ground from the looks of her," someone shouted. Laughter rippled through the room. Clara felt her face burn, but she kept her chin up. She'd promised herself that much. Whatever happened today, her children would not see her break. "She's got 5 young'uns," another voice called. "Who's gonna feed all them mouths I can barely feed myself?" "Ain't no charity here, Silas. We came for wives, not whole orphanages." More laughter, louder this time. Emma, her 11-year-old, tugged at Clara's hand. "Mama, why are they being so mean?" "Hush now," Clara murmured. "Stand tall, baby. We Whitmores stand tall." But God, it was hard. 2 years of standing tall. 2 years since Robert walked into that blizzard and never came back. 2 years of watching her children grow thinner, watching their clothes fall apart, watching hope drain from their eyes like water from a cracked cup. The mail-order bride program had been her last option. She'd spent her final coins on train tickets west, believing foolishly, desperately believing that someone would want her. "Let's move on," a man near the front said loudly. "There's other women waiting. Good women. Women without baggage." Clara flinched. Baggage. Her children were baggage now. Thomas, her 9-year-old son, stepped forward. Suddenly his small fists clenched. "My mama ain't baggage. She's the best mama in the whole world, and you're all just—" "Thomas!" Clara caught his shoulder. "Enough." "But Mama—" "I said enough." The boy's eyes filled with tears, but he stepped back, his jaw tight with fury. He was too young to fully understand. The auctioneer, a round man named Horace Bickford, mopped his forehead with a stained handkerchief. "Well now, surely someone's interested. Mrs. Whitmore's healthy, hard-working—" "She's skin and bones, Horace. Look at her." Clara was skin and bones. She'd given her portions to her children for months now. The dress she wore hung on her frame like a sack on a scarecrow. "How about $50? Horace tried. "That's a bargain, gentlemen. A steal." Silence. 40? Nothing. Come now, 25. Anyone. The quiet stretched on, broken only by Lily's soft crying and the wind howling against the windows. Snow was piling up outside. Clara could see it through the grimy glass, white and thick and deadly. If no one bid on her today, she and her children would be turned out into that snow. The program had rules. Unclaimed women were sent back east, but Clara didn't have money for tickets. She didn't have money for anything. "Mama," Will whispered, her 6-year-old pressing against her leg. He'd been sick for weeks, his cough getting worse every night. "Mama, I'm scared." "I know, baby, I know." "Mama, are we gonna die?" Clara's heart cracked. Just a little more, just another piece breaking off. "No," she said firmly. "No, We are not going to die. Whitmores don't die. We survive. But even as she said it, she wondered if it was a lie. The door at the back of the saloon opened. Cold air rushed in carrying snowflakes that melted the moment they touched the warm air inside. Every head turned to see who'd entered. He was tall. That was the first thing Clara noticed. Tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a coat that had seen better days and boots caked with mud and snow. His hat was pulled low, shadowing his face, and when he stepped inside and closed the door behind him, he moved with the careful economy of a man who'd learned not to waste energy. "Well, well," Horace said, brightening. "Mr. Tucker didn't expect to see you here today." The man Tucker didn't respond immediately. He was scanning the room, taking in the crowd, the platform, the remaining women waiting along the wall. Then his gaze found Clara. She felt it like a physical touch. Those eyes, gray, she thought, or maybe blue, traveled over her face, her thin frame, her children clustered around her like frightened chicks. "What's the situation here?" His voice was quiet, but it carried. "Ah." Horace's enthusiasm dimmed. "This is Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. Tucker, widow from Philadelphia, 5 children. We've been, having some difficulty finding her a match." "I can see that." Someone snickered. "She's all yours if you want her, Tucker. Ain't nobody else gonna bid on that mess." Tucker turned slowly to look at the man who'd spoken. Just looked at him. Didn't say a word. The man's smile faded. He suddenly found his drink very interesting. Tucker turned back to the platform. To Clara. "Ma'am?" Clara nodded stiffly. "Sir." "These your children?" "They are." "All 5 of them?" "Every single one." He studied her for a long moment. Clara felt herself being weighed, measured, assessed, but not the way the other men had done it. They'd looked at her and seen problems, mouths to feed, work to manage. This man looked at her like he was trying to see something underneath. "What happened to your husband?" he asked. "He died." Clara's voice was flat. 2 years ago." "How? Does it matter?" "Might." Clara hesitated. She'd told this story so many times it had become just words, empty of the pain that used to live in them. He walked into a blizzard. They found his body 3 days later. Tucker's expression didn't change. "On purpose?" The question hit her like a slap. No one ever asked that. No one ever acknowledged the possibility that Robert hadn't gotten lost, that he'd made a choice. "I don't know," Clara said quietly. It was the truth. After 2 years, it was still the truth. Tucker nodded slowly. Then he looked at her children one by one. Sarah trying to look brave. Emma curious despite her fear. Thomas still angry. Will coughing into his sleeve. Lily face buried in Clara's neck. "Your boy there," Tucker said. "He sick?" "Just a cough." "Sounds like more than a cough." Clara's arms tightened around Lily. "He needs warmth and good food and rest. Things I can't give him right now." "Can't or won't?" Her temper flared. "Can't, sir. If I could. Don't you think I would? Do you think I enjoy watching my children suffer? Do you think I wanted to end up here being passed over like spoiled meat while men mock my family?" The room had gone silent. Tucker's lips twitched. Almost a smile. "You got fire, ma'am. That's good." "Fire doesn't feed children, Mr. Tucker." "No, but it keeps them alive long enough to find food." He turned to Horace. "What's the current bid?" Horace blinked. Well, there isn't one strictly speaking." "Then I'll start one." Tucker reached into his coat and pulled out a worn leather pouch. He opened it, looked inside, and his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. $3. Someone burst out laughing. $3? Hell, Tucker, that's less than the cost of a lame mule. It's all I got. The laughter died. Men exchanged uncomfortable glances. Josiah Tucker wasn't a man people laughed at twice. $3. Tucker repeated, looking at Horace. For the woman and her children. All of them. Mr. Tucker. Horace leaned forward, lowering his voice. Perhaps you should reconsider. 5 children is a considerable. Did I stutter? No, sir. Then write up the papers. Clara's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. $3. Her value had been assessed at $3. Less than a horse. Less than a good pair of boots. But it was $3 more than anyone else had offered. Wait. Her voice came out stronger than she expected. I want to know why. Tucker looked at her. Ma'am. Why would you do this? You don't know me. You don't know my children. $3 might be nothing to these men. But I can see it's not nothing to you. She nodded toward his worn coat, his patched boots. So why? The room held its breath. Tucker was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, When I came in here, I saw a room full of men who couldn't see past their own convenience. I saw a woman standing alone, holding her ground, refusing to break, even when everyone wanted her to. He paused. I know what that feels like. Clara stared at him. You asked why, Tucker continued. Here's your answer. I got a ranch 15 miles outside town. It's failing. I got debts I can't pay, and a winter coming that might kill what's left of my cattle. I got nothing to offer you but hard work and cold nights and probably a lot of disappointment. Then why? Because you're still standing. His eyes met hers. After everything, losing your husband, raising 5 kids alone, ending up in this godforsaken saloon with men treating you like garbage, you're still standing. That means something to me. He reached into his pouch and pulled out 3 silver dollars. They clinked against each other in his palm. This is everything I have, ma'am. Everything. I'm offering it to you because I reckon we might be able to help each other. Not because you're desperate, hell, we're both desperate, but because desperate people sometimes see things clearly that comfortable people miss. Clara's throat was tight. Her eyes were burning. And if I say no, then I'll walk out that door and you'll never see me again. His voice was calm. I won't force you into anything, Mrs. Whitmore. I ain't that kind of man. Mama. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Mama will needs a doctor. Clara looked at her son. Will's face was flushed with fever, his breath rattling in his chest. He needed warmth, medicine, food. She looked at her daughters. Sarah trying so hard to be strong. Emma still believing things could get better. Lily too young to understand anything except that Mama was scared. She looked at Thomas, her boy, who was so angry at a world that had stolen his father and was threatening to steal everything else. Then she looked at Josiah Tucker, a stranger with gray eyes and $3 and nothing to offer but honesty. What's your ranch like? She asked. Small, log cabin, 2 rooms, barn standing but needs work. Got about 40 head of cattle, though. I'll lose some this winter for sure. Is it warm? Got a fireplace. Burns hot when there's wood enough. Is there food? Not much. Enough to get through a few weeks if we're careful. Books? Tucker blinked, clearly surprised. Ma'am? I asked if you have books. My children need to learn. I won't let them grow up ignorant no matter what else happens. For the first time, something like respect flickered in Tucker's eyes. Got a Bible, nothing else. Then we'll start with that. She took a deep breath. $3, Mr. Tucker, for me and my 5 children. Those are your terms. Those are my terms. And you understand what you're taking on. 5 mouths to feed 5 lives depending on you. A woman who doesn't know the first thing about ranching? I understand. You might regret it. Might, but I reckon I'd regret walking out of here more. Clara looked at her children. At their thin faces, their hopeful eyes, their trust, that terrible, precious trust that somehow she would make things right. Then she looked at Josiah Tucker. All right, she said. Yes. The word fell into the silence like a stone into still water. Tucker nodded once. He walked forward and placed the $3 on Horace's table. The coins rang against the wood, a small sound, but it echoed through the room like a bell. "Get the papers," Tucker said, "and someone find me a blanket for that boy." Nobody moved. Tucker turned and looked at the crowd. Just looked. His hand didn't move toward his gun, but suddenly, everyone was very aware that he was wearing one. "I said someone find me a blanket." A man near the back scrambled to comply. As Horace rushed to prepare the marriage documents, Tucker climbed onto the platform. Up close, Clara could see the lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his dark hair, the calluses on his hands. A man who'd worked hard for everything he had, and probably lost most of it anyway. "Your boy," he said quietly, crouching down to Will's level. "What's his name?" "William. We call him Will." "Will." Tucker's voice was gentle now, so different from the hard tone he'd used with the crowd. "Son, can you hear me?" Will nodded weakly. "I'm going to pick you up now. Okay? Wrap you in a blanket and carry you out to my wagon. It'll be cold outside, but we'll get you warm soon. You trust me." Will looked at Clara. "It's all right, baby," Clara said. "You can trust him." Will looked back at Tucker. "You gonna take care of my mama?" "That's the plan." "Promise?" Tucker was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I promise I'll try. That's the honest answer. I can't promise everything will be easy, but I can promise I'll try harder than I've tried at anything in my life." Will considered this with the gravity only a sick child could muster. Then he held out his arms. Tucker lifted him carefully, cradling the boy against his chest. Someone thrust a blanket at him, and he wrapped Will up tight. "Mrs. Whitmore." Tucker looked at Clara. "Can your other children walk to the wagon?" "We can walk," Sarah said firmly. "We've walked farther than 15 miles before. Not in snow like this, you haven't." "We can do it," Emma piped up. "We're Whitmores. Whitmores can do anything." Something almost soft crossed Tucker's face. "That's so? Mama says so." "Well then," he looked at Clara. "Sounds like your mama's a smart woman." "She's the smartest person in the whole world," Lily announced from Clara's arms. "She knows everything." "Everything, huh?" "Everything." Tucker's lips quirked. "Then I reckon I made a good investment." Horace was waving them over papers ready. Clara signed her name in neat, careful script. Clara Margaret Whitmore, then watched Tucker add his own signature, rougher but legible. Josiah Samuel Tucker. "This is highly unusual," Horace muttered as he stamped the documents. "Most irregular. 5 children, $3. I've never seen the like." "Write it down in your records," Tucker said. "Might make for an interesting story someday." He handed the papers to Clara. She folded them carefully and tucked them into her dress next to her heart. "Mrs. Tucker," Tucker said. Clara startled. She'd forgotten. She had a new name now. "That's me," she said. "I suppose." Ready to go home. Home. Such a simple word. Such an enormous promise. Clara looked around the saloon one last time. At the men who hadn't wanted her. At the women still waiting along the wall, some watching with envy, others with pity. At Horace already moving on to the next auction. Then she looked at her children. At Thomas, still wary but curious now. At Sarah, shouldering the family's one carpet bag. At Emma, bouncing on her toes with anxious energy. At Lily, thumb in mouth, watching everything with wide eyes. At Will, wrapped in a stranger's arms, already half asleep against Tucker's shoulder. "Yes," Clara said. "We're ready." The cold hit them the moment they stepped outside. Clara gasped. She'd forgotten how brutal Wyoming winters could be. The wind cut through her thin dress like knives. "Here." Tucker was shrugging off his coat, one-handed, still holding Will. "Put this on." "Mr. Tucker, I couldn't." "You can and you will. I'm used to cold. You ain't. Put it on." Clara hesitated, then took the coat. It was still warm from his body, heavy with the smell of horses and wood smoke. She wrapped it around herself and immediately felt better. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. The wagon ain't much warmer." The wagon was in fact barely warmer than standing in the open air, but Tucker had laid down hay in the bed, and he settled the children in together, covering them with another blanket he produced from somewhere. "Sarah, you're oldest. Keep your brothers and sisters warm. Don't let that blanket slip." "Yes, sir." "The ride's about 2 hours in this snow. It'll be dark by the time we get home. There's jerky in that tin there if anyone gets hungry." "Yes, sir." Tucker paused. "You don't have to call me sir." Sarah raised her chin. "What should I call you then?" For a moment, Tucker looked uncertain. It was the first crack Clara had seen in his composure. "Tucker's fine," he said finally. "Or Joe. That's what folks called me growing up." "Mr. Joe," Sarah said, testing it out. "Close enough." He turned to Clara. "Ma'am, you can ride up front with me or in the back with your children. Your choice." Clara looked at the front seat exposed, cold nothing between her and the wind but Tucker's borrowed coat. Then she looked at her children huddled together under the blanket. "Up front," she said. "I want to see where we're going." Something flickered in Tucker's eyes. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "Yes, ma'am." He helped her up onto the seat, then climbed up himself and took the reins. An old horse waited patiently in the traces, a mare with a coat gone gray around the muzzle. "This is Bess," Tucker said. "She's slow, but she's steady. Won't spook even in a blizzard." "She looks kind." "She is." Tucker clicked his tongue and Bess started forward. "Kindest soul I know, truth be told." They rode in silence for a while. The snow fell steadily, muffling everything, turning the world white and quiet. Clara could hear her children murmuring to each other in the wagon bed, could hear Will's rattling breath, could hear her own heart beating. "Mr. Tucker," she said finally. "Joe?" "Joe." The name felt strange on her tongue. "What you said back there, about being desperate yourself." "What about it? How bad is it really?" He was quiet for a long moment. The reins sat easy in his hands, and Bess plodded on through the snow. "Bad," he said finally. "Got a loan coming due in 3 months. Don't have the money to pay it. Man named Blackwood's been trying to buy my land for 2 years. He'll get it when the bank forecloses." "How much do you owe?" $800. Might as well be 8,000. Clara absorbed this. $800. An impossible sum. "And you spent your last $3 on me." "I did." "Why, really why? Not the pretty speech you gave in there. The real reason." Tucker was quiet for so long, Clara thought he wasn't going to answer. "My folks died when I was 16, he said finally. "Bandits. My brothers and I split up the ranch and I got the worst piece, the land nobody else wanted. I was supposed to fail." He shifted the reins to one hand. "I didn't fail. Built something from nothing. Then I lost most of it. Drought bad winter's woman who said she loved me running off with someone richer." His jaw tightened. "Everyone's been waiting for me to give up. Sell out to Blackwood. Admit I was beat. But you haven't." "No, I haven't." He looked at her. "When I walked into that saloon today, I wasn't planning on bidding on anyone. Came to get supplies, heard about the auction, figured I'd watch. Nothing more." "What changed?" "You did." Clara frowned. "I don't understand." "You were standing up there with 5 children getting mocked by every man in the room, and you didn't cry. Didn't beg. Didn't make yourself small to try to seem less threatening." His voice was rough. "You just stood there and took it, and your eyes were saying, 'I dare you to break me.'" Clara's throat tightened. "I know that look," Tucker continued. "I've worn it myself more times than I can count, and I thought maybe 2 people who refuse to break might have a chance together. Maybe." "That's a lot of maybes." "It is. We might make things worse for each other. I don't know anything about ranching. My children are hungry, and one of them is sick. She stopped. I'm not the woman you probably wanted. I didn't want any woman. Not for a long time. After Martha left, I figured I was done with that part of life. Then why? Because you're not Martha. His voice was simple. Martha looked at this land and saw everything it wasn't. You haven't even seen it yet, and you already asked about books for your children. That tells me something. What does it tell you? That you're thinking about building, not escaping. That you're planning for a future, not just surviving the present. He glanced at her. That's the kind of person who might be able to make this work. Clara pulled his coat tighter around herself. The cold was seeping through, but she barely felt it. I should tell you something, she said. Go ahead. My husband, Robert, he didn't just walk into that blizzard, he walked into it on purpose. Tucker didn't react, just kept his eyes on the road. He'd lost everything, Clara continued. Made bad investments, borrowed from the wrong people. By the time I found out, there was nothing left. He couldn't face it. Couldn't face me. So he walked into the snow and never came back. And left you to deal with the mess. Yes. That make you angry. Every single day. The words came out harder than she intended. Every single day, I'm angry. At him for being weak. At myself for not seeing it sooner. At the world for making this the only option I had left. She took a breath. I'm not a good person, Mr. Tucker. I'm angry and I'm bitter and I'm so tired I can barely think straight. If you're expecting gratitude, I'm not expecting anything. Good. Because I don't have anything to give except work. Hard work. I'll do whatever needs doing to keep my children alive and safe, but I can't promise to be pleasant about it. To her surprise, Tucker laughed. It was a short sound, rusty from disuse, but genuine. Ma'am Clara, I don't need pleasant. Pleasant doesn't survive winters out here. I need someone who won't quit, and you just told me you're angry enough to fight the whole world. He shook his head. That's not a weakness. That's fuel. Clara stared at him. In all her life, no one had ever said her anger was useful. Her mother had called it unladylike. Robert had called it exhausting. The world had called it inappropriate. You're a strange man, Joe Tucker. Been told that before. It wasn't an insult. Didn't take it as one. They rode on in silence. The snow kept falling. Somewhere behind them, Clara's children had fallen asleep, their breathing soft and steady under the blanket. For the first time in 2 years, Clara felt something other than despair. She wasn't sure what to call it yet. Not hope. Hope felt too fragile, too likely to shatter. But something. A spark. A possibility. $3 and a stranger's faith. It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd had this morning. And Clara Whitmore. Clara Tucker now was used to building something from nothing. The cabin appeared through the snow like a ghost. Small. Dark. Hunched against the hillside as if trying to disappear. Clara felt her heart sink, but she kept her face still. She'd promised herself she wouldn't show disappointment. Whatever this place was, it was shelter. It was warmth. It was more than her children had now. It ain't much, Joe said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. I know. It has walls. It does. And a roof. Most of one. Clara almost laughed. Almost. Most of one will do. Joe pulled Bess to a stop and climbed down. His boots crunched in the snow as he came around to help Clara, then moved to the wagon bed where the children were stirring. Sarah. Emma. We're here. Sarah sat up, blinking. Her eyes found the cabin, and Clara watched her daughter's face go through the same journey hers had. Hope, disappointment, acceptance. It's small, Emma said, not bothering to hide her reaction. Emma, Clara's voice was sharp. But it's got a chimney, Emma added quickly. That means fire, right? I like fire. Joe lifted Will from the wagon. The boy was burning up now, his breathing worse than before. Let's get inside. I'll start the fire. The interior was exactly what Clara had expected. One main room with a stone fireplace, a rough table, 2 chairs. A bedroom door stood open, revealing a simple bed with a patchwork quilt. Everything was clean, but worn, maintained, with the kind of desperate care that spoke of a man holding on by his fingernails. Bedroom's yours, Joe said, settling Will onto a chair near the cold fireplace. You and the children. I'll sleep out here. Mr. Tucker. Joe. Joe, this is your home. We can't take your bed. You can and you will. He was already kneeling at the fireplace, building a fire with practiced hands. 5 children need proper sleep. I've slept on worse than a wooden floor. Clara wanted to argue, but Will coughed a terrible rattling sound that made her chest ache. She moved to her son instead, pressing her hand to his forehead. He's burning up. I know. Joe didn't look up from the fire. Got some willow bark tea that might help. Not much, but it's something. We need a doctor. Nearest doctor's in town. 15 miles. In this snow, that's a day's ride each way. Then we go tomorrow. If the storm lets up. Joe got the fire going and stood brushing off his hands. Right now, we keep him warm, get fluids in him, and pray. Clara's jaw tightened. She'd been praying for 2 years. Praying hadn't brought Robert back. Praying hadn't fed her children. Praying hadn't stopped her from ending up on an auction block, but she nodded anyway. What else could she do? The first night was chaos. 5 children, 1 small cabin, not enough beds, not enough blankets, not enough of anything. Clara organized them as best she could. Sarah and Emma sharing the bed with Lily Thomas on a pallet on the floor. Will closest to the fire where she could watch him. She didn't sleep. She sat in one of the rough chairs watching the flames, listening to her children's breathing, waiting for Will's cough to turn into something worse. Sometime past midnight, Joe appeared at her side with a cup of tea. You should rest. Can't. Your boy's gonna need you strong tomorrow. My boy needs me watching him tonight. Clara took the tea but didn't drink. You should rest too. You've got a ranch to run. Ranch can wait. Can it? She looked at him. In the firelight, his face was all shadows and hard angles. You said you had debts, cattle to tend, work that needs doing. Nothing that won't keep till morning. That's not true, and we both know it. Joe was quiet for a moment. Then he sat down in the other chair, stretching his legs toward the fire. You always this stubborn. Always. My mother called it my worst quality. Sounds like a wise woman. She died when I was 12. Consumption. I'm sorry. Clara shrugged. It was a long time ago. They sat in silence. The fire crackled. Will coughed in his sleep, but didn't wake. Tell me about the debts, Clara said finally. Now. I can't sleep anyway. Might as well know what we're dealing with. Joe rubbed his face with one hand. He looked exhausted, Clara realized. More exhausted than she'd noticed before. $800, he said. Owed to the bank in town. Loan came due 6 months ago, but they gave me an extension. Extension runs out in 3 months. What happens then? If I can't pay, they foreclose. Blackwood buys the land at auction for pennies on the dollar. He's been waiting for it, circling like a vulture. Who's Blackwood? Cornelius Blackwood. Owns most of the land in this valley. Wants to own all of it. Joe's voice hardened. My property's got the only creek that doesn't dry up in summer. He needs it for his cattle operation. So he's the villain. He's the man with money and power and no conscience about using either. Clara absorbed this. $800. 3 months. A powerful enemy waiting for them to fail. What are our assets? Joe blinked. Our what? Assets. What do we have? Cattle equipment, anything we can sell or leverage. I got about 40 head of cattle, old Bess and 2 other horses. The cabin, the barn, the land itself 60 acres. He paused. That's it. No savings. Spent my last $3 today. Clara set down her tea and stood. Where do you keep your records? My what? Financial records, ledgers, receipts, loan documents. Joe stared at her like she'd started speaking another language. I got a notebook where I write things down sometimes. Stack of papers in a drawer, that's about it. Show me. Now. I told you, I can't sleep. He showed her. The notebook was barely half filled, the handwriting cramped and uncertain. The stack of papers was exactly that. A stack, no organization, no system, receipts, mixed with bills, mixed with letters from the bank. Clara spread everything out on the kitchen table and began sorting. Joe watched her work with something like wonder on his face. You know what you're doing. I kept my father's books from the time I was 12. After my mother died, someone had to. Her hands moved efficiently, creating piles, income here, expenses there, debts in a third stack. Robert never let me touch our finances. Said it wasn't a woman's concern. How'd that work out? He lost everything and walked into a blizzard. Clara's voice was flat. So not well. By the time gray light started seeping through the windows, Clara had a clear picture of Joe Tucker's financial situation. It was worse than he'd told her, but also better in some ways he hadn't seen. You've been paying twice for some things, she said when he brought her coffee. These receipts here, you paid the feed store in September and again in October for the same order. I did. You did. And these charges from the blacksmith don't match your records. Either someone's been cheating you, or your math is wrong. Probably both. Joe looked embarrassed. Never was much good with numbers. I am. Clara tapped the papers into a neat stack. Here's what I know. You owe $800. You have about 40 cattle worth maybe $20 each if you can get a fair price. That's $800 right there. Can't sell all my cattle. Got nothing to rebuild with. I know. But it tells us the assets exist. The problem isn't that you have nothing, it's that the system is designed to keep you from using what you have. She looked at him. Blackwood controls the stockyard in town, doesn't he? How'd you know that? Because if you could sell your cattle at fair market value, you wouldn't be in this position. Someone's controlling the price. Joe's expression shifted from confusion to anger. That son of a bitch. Language. Sorry. He didn't sound sorry. But you're right. Every time I try to sell, the price is lower than it should be. I thought it was just bad timing. It's not bad timing, it's strategy. He's squeezing you out. Joe sat down heavily. So, what do we do? We find another buyer, someone outside Blackwood's control. There isn't anyone else for 100 miles. Then we go 100 miles? Clara's jaw was set. You said you weren't going to give up. Neither am I. We have 3 months to find $800. That's a lot of time if we use it right. Joe looked at her. Really looked at her, and something changed in his face. Something softened. You're not what I expected, he said quietly. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone grateful, I guess. Someone who'd be happy just to have a roof and not ask questions. Do you want me to be that person? No. He shook his head. No, I reckon I don't. Will's fever broke on the 3rd day. Clara had barely slept, barely eaten, spending every moment at her son's side, cooling his forehead with wet cloths, forcing willow bark tea between his lips, praying despite herself. When his eyes finally opened, clear, focused, present, she burst into tears. Mama? Will's voice was weak but there. Mama, why are you crying? Because you scared me, baby. You scared me so bad. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just get better. Promise me you'll get better. I promise. Joe appeared in the doorway. He'd been handling everything else while Clara focused on Will, feeding the other children, keeping the fire going, checking on the cattle, doing the work of two people without complaint. He's awake. He's awake. Clara wiped her face with her sleeve. His fever's down. Thank God. Thank you. Clara looked at him. You didn't have to do all this. The children, the house. We're partners now, ain't we? That's what partners do. Partners. The word settled into Clara's chest like something warm. Mr. Joe. Will's voice was thin. Are you our new pa? Joe went still. Clara held her breath. I don't know, son, Joe said finally. That's not for me to decide. That's for your mama and for you kids. My other pa went away and didn't come back. I know. Are you gonna go away too? Joe crossed the room and knelt beside Will's pallet. Up close, Clara could see the emotion he was trying to hide, the careful way he held himself, the gentleness he didn't want to admit to. Well, I can't promise you everything's gonna be easy. Winter's hard. Life out here's harder. But I can promise you this, I ain't gonna walk away. Whatever happens, I'm gonna be here fighting. For this ranch. For your mama. For you and your brothers and sisters. Even if it gets really bad. Especially then. Will considered this with the gravity of a 6-year-old who'd already learned that adults sometimes lied. Okay, he said finally. I believe you. Good. Joe stood. Now get some rest. Your mama's been worried sick about you, and she needs sleep almost as bad as you do. I don't need... Clara started. Yes, you do. Joe's voice was firm. I'll watch him. You sleep. I can't. Clara. It was the first time he'd used her name without prompting. She looked up surprised. Your children need you strong, Joe said. Will's gonna be fine. The crisis is over. But there's more coming. There's always more coming. And you won't survive it if you run yourself into the ground. He was right. She knew he was right. But letting go, trusting someone else to watch over her child, that was hard. Harder than anything she'd done in 2 years. 2 hours, she said finally. Wake me in 2 hours. I will. She didn't believe him, but she was too tired to argue. She stumbled to the bedroom where her daughters were already asleep and collapsed onto the bed without even removing her shoes. She slept for 6 hours. Joe didn't wake her. When she emerged furious and rested despite herself, she found her children gathered around the table while Joe showed them how to play cards. You said 2 hours. I lied. He didn't look up from his hand. Thomas, your turn. You lied. Yep. And I'd do it again. You needed sleep more than I needed your help. Clara wanted to be angry. She really did. But Emma was laughing at something Thomas said, and Sarah was smiling for the first time since Philadelphia, and even Will, still weak, still pale, was watching the game with interest. Her children looked almost happy. Fine, Clara said, but we're talking about boundaries later. Yes, ma'am. The first trip to town came a week later. They needed supplies, medicine for Will, flour, salt, things Joe's bare pantry couldn't provide. Clara insisted on coming despite Joe's reservations. People in town won't be kind, he warned her as they hitched Bess to the wagon. They've heard about the auction by now, about me spending $3 on a woman with 5 kids. Let them talk. It ain't just talk. Blackwood's got friends. Most of the businesses in town depend on him one way or another. Then we'll find the ones that don't. The ride to town took most of the morning. Clara left the children at the ranch, Sarah in charge, strict instructions to keep Will warm and everyone fed. It felt strange leaving them. She'd barely let them out of her sight since Robert died. But Joe was right. She couldn't protect them from everything. She had to trust them to survive a few hours without her. Bitter Creek was a small town, not much more than a main street, with a handful of buildings clinging to it like barnacles. General store, blacksmith, saloon, bank, church. A few houses scattered around the edges. Everything looked gray and cold under the winter sky. People stared as Joe helped Clara down from the wagon. She felt their eyes on her, curious, contemptuous, pitying. The mail-order bride who'd sold for less than a horse. The desperate woman with 5 children hanging off her skirts. Let them look, she thought. Let them see. The general store was warm inside, smelling of coffee and tobacco and dried goods. A woman behind the counter, middle-aged, sharp-eyed mouth, set in a permanent frown, looked up as they entered. "Mr. Tucker? Mrs. Miller. Heard you got yourself a wife." The woman's gaze swept over Clara, assessing and dismissing in one motion. "And 5 new mouths to feed. News travels fast. Not much else to do in winter." Mrs. Miller's attention returned to Clara. "You're her, then? The one from the auction?" "I am." Clara kept her voice steady. "Clara Tucker. Pleased to meet you." Mrs. Miller didn't return the pleasantry. "Got a list." Joe handed over the paper Clara had prepared. Mrs. Miller scanned it, her frown deepening with each item. Willow bark flour, salt coffee, cornmeal beans, bacon. She looked up. "This is a lot of credit, Tucker." "I'll pay when I can, always have." "That was before you took on a family of 6. Mrs. Miller set the list down. "I'm sorry, but I can't extend more credit. Not with your situation being what it is." Clara's stomach dropped. "Our situation?" "Everyone knows about the loan, about Blackwood circling." Mrs. Miller's voice wasn't unkind exactly, just practical. "If Tucker loses that ranch, he can't pay his debts. I got a business to run. We're not going to lose the ranch." "That's not how I hear it." "Then you're hearing wrong." Clara stepped forward. "We have a plan. We have assets. We have 3 months to turn things around." "Mrs. Tucker." Now there was pity in Mrs. Miller's eyes. "I've seen a dozen ranchers come through here with plans and assets and timelines. They're all gone now. Blackwood saw to that. We're not them." That's what they all said. The door opened behind them. Cold air rushed in, and with it a man Clara had never seen before. But from the way Joe's whole body went rigid, she knew exactly who it was. "Well, well." The voice was smooth-cultured wrong for this rough town. "Josiah Tucker, I heard you'd finally taken a wife." Clara turned. Cornelius Blackwood was not what she'd expected. Where Joe was rough-hewn and weathered, Blackwood was polished, expensive coat, clean boots, gray hair, carefully combed. He looked like a Boston businessman, not a Wyoming rancher. "Blackwood." Joe's voice was flat. "And this must be the famous Mrs. Tucker." Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. "The woman who sold for $3. I must say I was impressed. That takes a certain kind of desperation." Clara felt her temper flare, but kept it leashed. "Mr. Blackwood." "Mrs. Tucker." He tipped his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "I hope you're enjoying your new home, such as it is. It has walls and a roof, that's enough. For now, perhaps." Blackwood's gaze slid to Joe. "But winters are hard out here, and spring comes with its own challenges. Loan payments, for instance." "My finances ain't your concern." "Everything in this valley is my concern, Tucker. You know that." Blackwood's smile widened. "But I didn't come here to make trouble. Quite the opposite, in fact." He reached into his coat and produced an envelope. "I've prepared a new offer for your property, $700, cash. That's more than fair given the current condition of the ranch. The land alone is worth twice that. The land is worth what someone's willing to pay for it, and I'm the only one willing to pay anything at all." Blackwood held out the envelope. "Take it, Tucker. Pay off your debts. Give your new wife a fresh start somewhere else. It's the smart move." Clara watched Joe's face. Watched the struggle there, the temptation, the exhaustion, the desperation. $700. It would clear their debts with money left over. They could go somewhere else. Start again, maybe find a place where Blackwood's shadow didn't reach. Then Joe's jaw hardened. "No. I'm sorry." I said no. Joe pushed the envelope back toward Blackwood. That land's mine. I built it from nothing. I ain't selling it to you for any price. Pride's an expensive luxury, Tucker, especially for a man who just spent his last $3 on... Careful. Joe's voice went dangerous. Real careful about what you say next. Blackwood's eyes flickered. For just a moment, something ugly showed through the polished surface. I'm trying to help you. No, you're trying to rob me. There's a difference. Is there? Blackwood tucked the envelope back into his coat. I suppose we'll see. The bank won't be as patient as I am. And when they foreclose, not if, when I'll buy your land at auction for half what I'm offering now. He turned to Clara. Mrs. Tucker, I hope you know what you've gotten yourself into. This man is going to lose everything. And when he does, you and those 5 children will be out in the cold again. Think about that. Clara met his eyes. I've been out in the cold before, Mr. Blackwood. I survived it. I'll survive whatever comes next, too. We'll see. He left. The door closed behind him, and the tension in the room slowly released. Mrs. Miller let out a breath. That man's going to make your lives miserable. He already has. Joe's hands were shaking slightly. Anger or fear, Clara couldn't tell. But we ain't backing down. I hope you know what you're doing. Mrs. Miller hesitated, then reached under the counter. Look, I can't extend credit, but I can give you what you came for at cost. No markup. It's not much, but... That's enough. Clara's voice was soft. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Blackwood finds out I helped you, he'll make trouble for me too. Then we won't tell him. Mrs. Miller filled their order silently, her movements quick and efficient. When she handed over the wrapped packages, her eyes met Clara's. You meant what you said about having a plan. I meant every word. Then I hope you're as smart as you think you are, because that man doesn't lose. Ever. The ride home was quiet. Joe stared straight ahead, hands tight on the reins, jaw clenched. Clara let the silence stretch, sensing he needed time to process. He's going to come at us again, she said finally. I know. Harder next time. I know. We need allies. People willing to stand against him. There ain't many. He's got his hooks in most of the town. Then we find the ones he doesn't have. Clara thought about Mrs. Miller, her reluctant kindness, her quiet defiance. She helped us. There might be others. Maybe. Joe didn't sound convinced. There's always someone who's been hurt by men like Blackwood. Someone waiting for a chance to fight back. We just have to find them. Joe was quiet for a long time. Then he said, You really believe we can do this? I believe we can try. Clara pulled his coat tighter around herself. She'd been wearing it since that first day, and he hadn't asked for it back. And I believe trying is better than giving up. Even if we lose. Especially then. She looked at him. My husband gave up. He looked at an impossible situation and decided death was easier than fighting. I won't do that. I won't teach my children that quitting is an option. Even when it's the smart thing to do. Smart isn't everything. Clara's voice was fierce. Sometimes stubborn beats smart. Sometimes refusing to die is more important than knowing when to quit. Joe was silent. Then slowly, he smiled. It transformed his face, made him look younger, almost hopeful. You know what, I think you might be the best $3 I ever spent. Damn right I am. He laughed, a real laugh this time, surprised out of him. Where'd a proper Boston lady learn to talk like that? 2 years of raising 5 children alone with no money and no help. You learn all kinds of things. I reckon you do. They rode on through the snow. Behind them, the town disappeared into white. Ahead, the ranch waited, small and struggling and full of problems they couldn't solve. But for the first time, Clara felt like they might actually have a chance. Not because the odds were good. Because they were too stubborn to care about odds. That night, after the children were asleep, Clara sat at the table with Joe's accounts spread before her. He sat across from her, watching her work with a cup of coffee cooling in his hands. "What are you looking for?" "Leverage." Clara traced a line of numbers with her finger. "Blackwood's been squeezing you for 2 years. That means he's been cheating you for 2 years. Charging too much for supplies, paying too little for cattle, manipulating prices. So there's a pattern, and patterns can be proved." She looked up. "If we can show the bank that your losses weren't just bad luck, that you were deliberately sabotaged, they might give us more time." "The bank's in Blackwood's pocket." "The local manager might be. But what about the territorial office? Banks have regulations, oversight. If we can get documentation to someone outside his control." "That's a big if." "Everything's a big if right now." Clara set down her pen. "But we have 3 months, and I refuse to spend them just waiting to lose." Joe studied her. "You're really something, you know that." "I'm desperate. Desperate people think differently." "No." He shook his head. "It's more than that. You see things, angles, possibilities, things I'd never think of in 100 years. That's because you're a rancher. You see land and cattle and weather. I see numbers and systems and how people cheat." Clara almost smiled. "We make a good team." "Yeah." Joe's voice was soft. "I reckon we do." Their eyes met across the table. Something shifted in the air, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire, a tension that wasn't unpleasant. "I should sleep," Clara said, looking away first. "You should." She gathered the papers, stood, hesitated. "Joe, yeah. Thank you. For today. For standing up to Blackwood, for not backing down. I know it would have been easier to take his offer." "Easier ain't always better." "No." Clara smiled. "It isn't." She went to bed thinking about stubborn men and desperate women, and the strange alchemy that happened when 2 people decided to fight together instead of alone. $3 and a shared enemy. It wasn't much to build a future on, but it was something. The blizzard came without warning. Clara woke to a sound she'd never heard before, a howling so deep it seemed to come from the earth itself. The cabin shook. The windows rattled. And when she pushed open the bedroom door, she found Joe already at the front window, his face grim. "How bad?" "Bad." He didn't turn around. "Worst I've seen in 5 years. We're going to be stuck here for days." "The cattle?" "Pray they found shelter." Clara moved to stand beside him. Through the frost-covered glass, she could see nothing but white. White sky, white ground, white air thick with snow that fell sideways, driven by a wind that sounded like screaming. "What do we do?" "We survive." Joe finally looked at her. His eyes were worried in a way she hadn't seen before. "Got enough wood for maybe 4 days if we're careful. Food for a week if we stretch it. And if the storm lasts longer, then we got problems." Behind them the children were stirring. Sarah appeared first, then Emma, then Thomas, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Will and Lily came last, the little girl dragging her blanket behind her. "Mama?" Will's voice was still weak from his illness. "What's that noise?" "Just a storm, baby. We're safe inside." "It sounds angry." "Storms can't be angry. They're just wind and snow." "This one sounds angry," Will insisted. Clara couldn't argue. He was right. The first day passed slowly. Clara kept the children occupied with lessons, reading for the older ones, letters for Lily, arithmetic for Thomas, who complained constantly but did the work anyway. Joe spent hours at the window, watching the storm, checking the fire rationing wood with the careful precision of a man who'd done this before. "You're worried about the cattle," Clara said during a quiet moment while the children ate their meager lunch. "Worried about everything." Joe rubbed his face with both hands. "If we lose too many head to this storm, we're finished. Don't matter what plans we make. How many can we afford to lose? 5, maybe 10 if we're lucky with the spring calves." He shook his head. But a storm like this trapped out in the open, we could lose half the herd. Then we do what we can and pray for the rest. You pray much? Clara considered the question. I used to, before Robert. Now I mostly just talk to myself and hope someone's listening. That's honest. Honest's all I got left. The second day, the storm showed no sign of letting up. The children grew restless. Thomas and Emma fought over nothing. Will had a coughing fit that scared everyone. Lily cried because she was bored and hungry and didn't understand why they couldn't go outside. I want to play in the snow. Not this snow, baby. This snow is dangerous. Snow can't be dangerous. It's soft. This snow can kill you. Clara's voice was sharper than she intended, and Lily's eyes filled with tears. Hey now. Joe crouched down to Lily's level. Your mama's right, but she didn't mean to scare you. Tell you what, when this storm passes, I'll build you the biggest snowman you ever saw. Deal. Lily sniffled. How big? Big is this cabin? That's really big. It'll be a really big snowman. Lily considered this. Okay, but you promise? I promise. She threw her arms around his neck. Clara watched Joe's face, the surprise, the hesitation, then something softer as his arms came up to hold the little girl. Thank you, Clara mouthed over Lily's head. Joe just nodded. That night, after the children were finally asleep, all five crowded into the bedroom for warmth. Clara and Joe sat by the fire. The wind still howled outside, but they'd grown used to it. Background noise now constant and relentless. Can I ask you something? Clara said. Go ahead. Earlier with Lily, you were good with her, natural. That a question? Do you have children? From before, I mean, you never said. Joe was quiet for a long moment. The firelight cast shadows across his face, hiding his expression. No, he said finally. Martha, my fiancée, she didn't want children. Said they'd tie her down. When she left, I figured that was that. You wanted them, though. Wanted a lot of things I didn't get. Clara pulled her knees up to her chest. I didn't want children. Not at first. Robert did. Said a man needed heirs, needed a legacy. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. 5 children later, he walked into a blizzard and left me to raise them alone. That ain't fair. No, it isn't. She looked at Joe. But I love them, every single one. They're difficult and loud, and they eat more than I can provide, and I love them more than I've ever loved anything in my life. I can see that. Can you? The way you look at them, the way you put yourself between them and anything dangerous. Joe's voice was soft. That's not obligation. That's love. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them away. What do you see when you look at them? What do you mean? My children. When you look at them, what do you see? 5 mouths to feed. Problems you didn't ask for, baggage. Joe was quiet for so long. Clara thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, I see Sarah trying to be the adult so you don't have to carry everything alone. I see Emma pretending nothing scares her because she thinks that's what brave means. I see Thomas angry at a world that took his father and gave him nothing but struggle. He paused. I see Will fighting to get stronger because he knows you're worried about him. And Lily just wants someone to build her a snowman. That's all. Just a snowman. Clara's tears fell then. She couldn't stop them. They're not baggage, Joe continued. They're not problems. They're just kids who've been through too much trying to figure out how to keep going. Same as all of us. Joe, I know I ain't their father. I ain't trying to replace nobody. But if you'll let me, I'd like to... He stopped, struggling for words. I'd like to be something. Not just the man who bought their mama. Something more. Clara reached across the space between them and took his hand. His fingers were rough and calloused, but they wrapped around hers gently. You already are. she said. Something more, I mean. You have been since the first day. They sat like that for a while, hands linked, watching the fire burn low. The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin, something warm was growing. The third day, Thomas stopped speaking. Clara noticed it at breakfast, the way her son ate in silence, the way he wouldn't meet anyone's eyes, the way he flinched when Joe walked past him. Thomas, you all right? No answer. Thomas, I asked you a question. I'm fine. You don't seem fine. I said I'm fine. He pushed away from the table and retreated to the corner, wrapping his arms around his knees. Clara started to follow, but Joe caught her arm. Let me. He's my son. I know, but I think I know what this is about. Joe's voice was gentle. Give me a few minutes. Clara hesitated, every instinct screaming at her to go to her child. But something in Joe's face made her nod. Joe crossed the room and sat down on the floor next to Thomas, not too close. The boy didn't look up. You know, Joe said conversationally, when I was about your age, my pa used to take me out to check the cattle every morning. Rain or shine, hot or cold. Said it built character. Thomas didn't respond. I hated it. Hated getting up early. Hated the cold, hated the work. Mostly I hated that he made me do it when my brothers got to sleep in. Still nothing. Then one day bandits came to our ranch. Killed my ma and pa both. I was 16. Joe's voice was steady, but Clara could hear the old pain beneath it. After that, I'd have given anything to get up early and check cattle with my father one more time. Thomas's shoulders tensed. I ain't trying to replace your pa, Joe continued. Nobody could do that. He was your father, and losing him, that's a wound that don't heal all the way. I know because I got the same wound. Finally, Thomas looked up. His eyes were red. You don't know anything. Maybe not, but I know what it feels like to be angry at someone you love for leaving you. To be angry at yourself for being angry. To want to hate them but not being able to, because they're gone, and hating them feels like betraying their memory. Thomas's face crumpled. He left us. He just left. I know. He was supposed to protect us. That's what fathers do. They protect their families. And he just walked away. I know. I hate him. The words came out like they'd been locked away for years. I hate him so much, and I miss him so much, and I don't know how to feel both things at the same time. Joe reached out slowly and put his hand on Thomas's shoulder. The boy didn't pull away. You feel both things because both things are true. That's what grief is, holding two impossible feelings at once and not letting either one destroy you. Does it ever stop hurting? No, but it gets easier to carry. Thomas was crying now, tears streaming down his face. I don't want a new father. I don't want to forget him. You won't forget him, and I ain't asking to be your father. Joe's voice was rough with emotion. But maybe I could be your friend. Someone who's got your back when things get hard. Thomas looked at him for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. Okay. 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 Friends. Joe smiled. It was a small thing, but real. Friends? Clara watched from across the room, tears running down her own face. Sarah came up beside her, slipping her hand into her mother's. He's good, Mama, Sarah whispered. Mr. Joe, he's really good. I know, baby, I know. The storm raged on. By the fourth day, they were running low on everything. Wood, food, patience. The children were climbing the walls, and even Clara's lessons couldn't hold their attention. The cold seeped in through every crack, and the fire seemed to give less heat no matter how much they fed it. We need more wood, Joe said grimly. Got maybe half a day's worth left. Can you get to the woodpile? Gonna have to try. If the storm's died down enough, I can make it to the barn and back. I'll go with you. No. I wasn't asking permission. Joe's jaw tightened. Clara, it's dangerous. Wind's still bad. You could get lost between here and the barn. Then we tie a rope to the door. I've read about that. Settlers used to do it. You've read about it. Despite everything, Joe almost smiled. You've read about surviving blizzards. I've read about everything. It's how I survived before I got here. Clara stood. We need wood. You can't carry enough by yourself. I'm going. She could see him wanting to argue. Could see him weighing her safety against their survival. Finally, he nodded. All right. But you stay close. You feel my hand, you don't let go. Understand? Understood. They bundled up in every piece of clothing they had. Joe tied a rope around his waist, then around Clara's, then secured the other end to the doorframe. The children watched with wide eyes. Sarah, you're in charge, Clara said. Keep the fire going with what we have left. Keep everyone calm. Yes, Mama. We'll be back soon. Promise. Clara kissed her daughter's forehead. Promise. Joe opened the door and the storm hit them like a wall. Clara gasped. She'd never felt cold like this cold that cut through every layer that stole the breath from her lungs. The snow was blinding, the wind deafening. Joe grabbed her hand. Stay with me. She couldn't speak, could barely see. She just held on and followed one step at a time, the rope their lifeline back to safety. The barn was only 50 feet away, but it felt like miles. They made it. Joe found the woodpile by memory, and they loaded their arms with as much as they could carry. Clara's fingers were numb, her face burning with cold, but she didn't stop. Enough, Joe shouted over the wind. Let's go back. They followed the rope, hand over hand, Clara clutching the wood against her chest. The cabin door appeared out of the white, and they stumbled inside, collapsing on the floor as Sarah slammed the door behind them. Mama, are you okay? I'm fine. Clara's teeth were chattering so hard she could barely speak. Just cold. Get me to the fire. They warmed up slowly, wrapped in blankets the children pressed against them on all sides. Joe's hands were blue, and Clara made him hold them near the flames despite his protests. That was brave, he said quietly when the children had retreated and they were alone by the fire. Stupid but brave. I couldn't let you go alone. I've done it before. That was before you had someone to come back to. Joe looked at her, really looked the way he had in the saloon that first day. Clara, I know. She cut him off. I know we barely know each other. I know this is strange and fast and probably foolish, but these past weeks... She stopped trying to find the right words. You've been more of a partner to me than Robert ever was. You listen to me. You respect my opinions. You look at my children and see people, not problems. That's just basic decency. No, it isn't. Trust me. Clara's voice was fierce. I spent 6 years married to a man who saw me as decoration, who made decisions without consulting me, who hid things because he didn't think I could handle the truth. You're nothing like that. I ain't exactly a prize, Clara. Failing ranch mountain of debt, powerful enemy trying to destroy us. I've survived worse. She took his hand, still cold but warming. And I'd rather face all of that with you than face anything alone ever again. Joe was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. I never thought I'd say this to anyone again. After Martha, I figured that part of my life was over. He took a breath. But you make me want things I'd stopped wanting. A future. A family. A reason to fight for something beyond just not losing. Then let's fight together. You sure about me, I mean? About this? Clara leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft, tentative, two people who'd forgotten how to hope learning it again. I'm sure, she whispered. I've never been more sure of anything. The storm broke on the 5th day. Clara woke to silence. No howling wind, no rattling windows, no constant assault of noise. Just quiet. Joe. He was already at the door, pulling on his boots. Storm's past. I need to check the cattle. I'm coming. No. Stay with the children. I'll be back soon. Joe. Clara. He turned and took her hands. I need you to stay here. If something's wrong, if the cattle are scattered or dead, the children shouldn't see that. Not yet. She wanted to argue, but she saw the fear in his eyes, the desperate need to protect her from whatever waited outside. All right, but you come back. You hear me? You come back. I'll come back. He kissed her forehead. I promise. She watched him go, trudging through snow that reached his thighs, disappearing into the blinding white of the morning sun on fresh powder. An hour passed, then 2. Mama, Sarah had joined her at the window. Where's Mr. Joe? Checking on the cattle. Shouldn't he be back by now? The snow's deep, it's slow going. But Clara was worried too. More than worried. By the time 3 hours had passed, she was pacing the cabin like a caged animal. Sarah watched the children. I'm going out. Mama, no? I have to find him. Clara bundled up and stepped out into the cold. The world was transformed white and glittering and beautiful in the way that deadly things sometimes were. She could see Joe's tracks leading toward the pasture, and she followed them, her heart pounding. She found him at the fence line, or what was left of it. He was standing motionless, staring at a gap in the wire that hadn't been there before. The fence was cut deliberately cleanly in a way that weather couldn't explain. Joe. He didn't turn around. Joe, what happened? They're gone. His voice was hollow. Most of them. 20 head at least, maybe more. Scattered during the storm when the fence went down. Clara moved to stand beside him. Through the gap in the fence, she could see tracks, cattle tracks disappearing into the wilderness. The storm didn't do this. No. Blackwood. Had to be. Probably sent men out just before the blizzard hit. Cut the fence, spooked the cattle, let the storm do the rest. Joe's hands were shaking. We're finished, Clara. Without those cattle, there's no way to make the loan payment. No way to save the ranch. Clara looked at the cut fence. At the tracks. At the man beside her, whose hope was draining away like water from a cracked cup. Something hardened inside her. No. Joe looked at her. No, what? No, we're not finished. Clara grabbed his arm and made him face her. This is what he wants. He wants us to give up. To look at this and decide it's impossible. That's how he wins. Clara, be realistic. I am being realistic. Realistic is understanding that we still have cattle. Maybe not as many as before, but some. Realistic is knowing that scattered cattle can be found. Realistic is refusing to let one man destroy us because he thinks he's entitled to everything we have. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Clara's voice was fierce. I understand that you've been fighting alone for too long, that you've forgotten what it's like to have someone in your corner. But you're not alone anymore, Joe. You have me. You have 5 children who are counting on us, and I refuse. I absolutely refuse to tell them that we gave up because some rich man cut a fence. Joe stared at her. The despair in his eyes was battling with something else now, something that looked like hope. We'd have to find the scattered cattle, in weather like this with no help? Then we find help. There have to be other ranchers who hate Blackwood, other people he's hurt. There are, but they're scared of him. Then we make them more scared of losing than of him. Clara took his face in her hands. Listen to me. I didn't survive 2 years of hell to give up now. I didn't cross the country with 5 children to watch everything fall apart. And I didn't fall in love with a stubborn, impossible man just to let him quit when things got hard. Joe's breath caught. You love me. I love you. The words came out easier than she'd expected. God help me, but I do. So you're going to stop standing here feeling sorry for yourself. You're going to come back to that cabin with me. And we're going to figure out how to save this ranch together. Understand? For a long moment, Joe just looked at her. Then slowly he smiled. Yes, ma'am. Good. Now come on. It's cold out here, and we've got work to do. They walked back to the cabin together, hand in hand through the snow. The fence was still cut. The cattle were still scattered. Blackwood was still circling. But for the first time since the storm hit, Clara felt like they might actually have a chance. Not because the odds had improved, because they were fighting together now, and together they were stronger than either of them alone. The next morning, Clara was awake before dawn. She sat at the table with Joe's ledgers spread before her, the fire crackling low, her mind racing through possibilities. Joe found her there when he came out of the main room, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "You been up all night." "Couldn't sleep." Clara didn't look up from the papers. "I've been thinking." "About?" Blackwood cut that fence before the storm. That means he knew the blizzard was coming. He planned this. So that's evidence. Premeditation. If we can prove he deliberately sabotaged us, proving anything against Blackwood is near impossible. He owns half the law in this territory. Then we go around the law. Clara finally met his eyes. We go to other ranchers, the ones he's hurt. Build a case so strong that even his friends can't ignore it. Joe sat down across from her. "You really think that'll work?" "I think it's our only chance." She pushed a piece of paper toward him. "I made a list of names. People you've mentioned. People Mrs. Miller mentioned. Anyone who might have a grievance against Blackwood. If even half of them are willing to talk. Most of them won't. They're too scared. Then we find the ones who aren't scared, or the ones who are angry enough to stop being scared." Joe studied the list. "Elena Santos, you got her name circled." Mrs. Miller mentioned her. Said her husband died 3 years ago under suspicious circumstances. Ranch borders Blackwood's land on the south. "I know Elena. Good woman. Tough." Joe nodded slowly. "Lost her husband in what everyone called an accident. Stampede during roundup. But Elena always said the cattle were spooked deliberately." That's where we start. They rode out that afternoon, leaving Sarah in charge with strict instructions to keep everyone inside. The snow was still deep, but the sky was clear, and Bess plodded through the drifts with patient determination. Elena Santos lived in a small adobe house at the edge of her property. When she opened the door and saw Joe and Clara standing there, her weathered face shifted from surprise to wariness. "Josiah Tucker. Been a while." "Elena, this is my wife Clara." "I heard." Elena's eyes moved to Clara, assessing. "The whole valley heard. $3, wasn't it?" "That's right." Something like respect flickered in Elena's expression. "Takes courage to come out here asking for help when you got nothing to bargain with." "We're not asking for charity," Clara said. "We're asking for alliance." Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she stepped aside. "Come in. I'll make coffee." The inside of Elena's home was sparse but clean. A crucifix hung on one wall. A faded photograph of a man Clara assumed was her husband sat on a small table near the window. Miguel was a good man. Elena caught Clara looking at the photograph. "Best man I ever knew. Blackwood killed him." "Can you prove it?" "No. That's the hell of it. I know it in my bones, but I can't prove a damn thing." Elena poured coffee with hands that shook slightly. "His men spooked our cattle during roundup. Miguel got trampled trying to control the herd. Everyone called it an accident." "But you don't believe that." Miguel had been working cattle since he was 10 years old. He knew how to handle a stampede. Something scared those animals, something deliberate. Elena's jaw tightened. "Week before it happened, Blackwood offered to buy our water rights. Miguel refused. Week after the funeral, he offered again. Lower price." Clara felt sick. "Did you sell?" "I told him to go to hell." Elena's smile was fierce. "He's been trying to squeeze me out ever since. But I'm still here. Stubborn, I reckon." "We need people like you," Joe said. "Stubborn people. People who won't roll over just because Blackwood tells them to." "What exactly are you proposing?" Clara leaned forward. "Blackwood's been hurting ranchers in this valley for years, cutting fences, manipulating prices, buying judges and bankers. But he's only able to do it because everyone's too scared to stand together. And you think you can change that?" I think if enough people tell their stories, document his crimes, we can take it to the territorial governor, someone outside Blackwood's influence." Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The territorial governor. You know how many people have tried to go over Blackwood's head? How many? 2 that I know of. One lost his ranch in a fire. The other just disappeared one day. Wife came home and found his horse in the stable, but no sign of him." Clara felt Joe tense beside her, but she kept her voice steady. That was when they went alone. What if they'd had witnesses, documentation, a group of people all telling the same story? Then Blackwood would have to burn down a lot of ranches. Elena's eyes narrowed. Or make a lot of people disappear. Exactly. There's safety in numbers. He can't destroy all of us. Elena was quiet for a long time. She stared into her coffee cup, like she was looking for answers there. "My son Diego," she said finally. "He's 19, good boy, works harder than most men twice his age. If I do this, if I stand against Blackwood publicly, I'm putting him at risk." "I know. You got children too, 5 of them. I know that too. And you're still willing to fight." Clara thought about her children, about Sarah's quiet strength and Emma's fearless heart. About Thomas learning to trust again. About Will still recovering, still fragile. About Lily, who just wanted a snowman and a world that didn't hurt. "I'm willing to fight because I have children," she said. "Because I refuse to teach them that bullies always win. That the right thing to do is roll over and accept defeat." She met Elena's eyes. "I've lost everything before. My husband, my home, my hope. I rebuilt once. I can do it again if I have to. But I won't go down without a fight." Elena studied her for a long moment. Then she set down her cup and stood. "Diego." A young man appeared in the doorway, tall, dark-haired, with his mother's fierce eyes. "Diego, saddle the horses. We're riding out to Thomas Gray's place." "Ma, Mrs. Tucker here has an idea. Might be crazy. Might get us all killed." Elena smiled grimly. "But it's better than dying slow." They spent the next 3 days riding from ranch to ranch, gathering allies. Thomas Gray, who'd lost half his herd to a mysterious illness right after refusing Blackwood's offer. Martha Chen, whose barn had burned the week she outbid Blackwood for land at auction. Jacob Thornton, driven out of business by inflated supply costs. Old Samuel Wright, whose son had been beaten half to death by men who were never caught. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Fear first, then anger, then a slow, cautious hope. "You really think this can work?" Martha Chen asked, her eyes still haunted by the memory of watching her barn burn. "I think together we're stronger than we are alone. Blackwood's got money, power, friends in high places. And we've got truth, numbers, and nothing left to lose." By the end of the 3rd day, they had 11 ranchers willing to stand together, 11 families who'd decided that fighting was better than dying slow. They gathered at Elena's ranch, too many to fit inside, so they stood in the yard, breath misting in the cold air. "Here's what we know," Clara said, her voice carrying in the clear winter air. "Blackwood has been systematically destroying ranchers in this valley for at least 5 years. He's used sabotage, price manipulation, intimidation, and probably worse." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "Each of us alone doesn't have enough evidence to prove anything, but together we have a pattern, a clear record of his crimes." She held up the ledger she'd been compiling. "I've documented every incident, dates, losses, witnesses. This is enough to demand an investigation." "Investigation by who?" Jacob Thornton's voice was skeptical. "The sheriff's in Blackwood's pocket. The territorial governor isn't. Neither is the federal marshal's office." Clara looked around the group. "We're not just talking about local crimes. We're talking about fraud, conspiracy, possibly murder. That's federal territory." "You know how to reach the federal marshal?" "No, but I know how to write a letter that'll make him want to reach us." Elena stepped forward. "I'm in, whatever it takes." "Me too," Thomas Gray said. One by one the others nodded. 11 voices, 11 families, 11 people who decided to stop being afraid. "Then we start tonight," Clara said. "Everyone writes down their story, every detail they can remember. We compile it all, make copies, send one to the territorial governor, one to the federal marshal, one to the newspapers in Cheyenne." The newspapers. Public pressure. Blackwood's power depends on people being afraid to speak. Once his crimes are public knowledge, that power shrinks. Joe had been quiet through most of the meeting, watching Clara work. Now he spoke up. "There's something else we need to discuss. The cattle." Everyone turned to look at him. "My fence was cut during the storm. Lost at least 20 head scattered into the wilderness. Without them, I can't make my loan payment. But more than that." He looked around the group. "How many of you lost cattle in that blizzard?" Hands went up, more than half. "Blackwood did the same thing to all of us. Cut fences, spooked herds, let the storm do his dirty work." Joe's voice was hard. "Some of those cattle are still out there, scattered but alive. If we work together, pool our resources, we might be able to round them up." "That's a lot of ground to cover," Samuel Wright said. "It is, but we've got a lot of people." Joe looked at Clara. "My wife figured out that Blackwood controls the stockyard in town. That's how he keeps prices low. He's the only buyer, so he sets the terms." "So, what do we do?" Clara stepped forward again. "There's a cattle buyer in Cheyenne who pays fair market value. If we can get our cattle there..." "Cheyenne's 100 miles away." "I know, but if we combine our herds, share the work. A cattle drive, in winter." Thomas Gray shook his head. "That's suicide." "It's a chance," Clara said. "Maybe our only one. Blackwood's expecting us to sell through his stockyard at his prices. He's expecting us to slowly bleed out until we have no choice but to accept his offers. But if we bypass him entirely, he'll try to stop us. Let him try." Joe's voice was quiet but fierce. "I'm done letting that man dictate my life. Done waiting for him to finish what he started. If we're going to lose everything anyway, I'd rather lose it fighting." The silence stretched. Clara could see people weighing the risks, calculating the odds. Then Elena spoke. "Diego and I will ride with you." "So will I," Thomas Gray said. One by one, the others committed. Not everyone, some had families they couldn't leave, cattle too scattered to gather. But enough. Enough to make it possible. "We leave in 3 days," Joe said. "That gives us time to round up what cattle we can find, make preparations. Anyone who can't ride can help with the documentation, get those letters ready to send." The meeting broke up, but the energy remained. For the first time in years, these people had hope. Dangerous hope maybe, foolish hope, but hope nonetheless. That night back at the cabin, Clara sat with her children and explained what was happening. She didn't sugarcoat it. They'd been through too much for that. "We're going to fight," she said. "Mr. Joe and I. We're going to try to save this ranch and stop a bad man from hurting more people." "Is it dangerous?" Sarah asked. "Yes." "Could you get hurt?" "Yes." Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want to help." "Sarah." "I'm 14. I can ride. I can help with the cattle." Her jaw was set in a way that reminded Clara painfully of herself. "You're always telling us that Whitmores don't give up, that we stand tall. How can we stand tall if we hide here while you do all the fighting?" Clara looked at Joe. He shrugged slightly. "Your call." "The younger children need to stay here," Clara said finally. "Someone has to take care of them, keep the home fire burning. That's important work too." "Then I'll ride with you." Sarah's voice was firm. "Emma can watch the others. She's old enough." "I am," Emma agreed, bouncing on her toes. "I can do it, Mama. I'll take care of everyone." "And me," Thomas said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. He'd been silent through the whole conversation, his face unreadable. "I want to go too." Thomas. "I know I'm only 9. I know I'm not as strong as Sarah, but I can help." He looked at Joe. "You said we were friends. Friends help each other, right? Joe crouched down to Thomas's level. That they do. But this is dangerous work. Your mama needs to know you're safe. Mama needs to know we're not scared, Thomas countered. She needs to know we believe in her, in both of you. Clara felt tears threatening. Her son, her angry, grieving, scared son, was trying to be brave for her. Thomas, baby. I'm not a baby. But his voice cracked when he said it. I want to do something. I'm tired of being scared. I'm tired of waiting for bad things to happen. Joe put his hand on Thomas's shoulder. You know what, I think you might be the bravest person in this room. Really? Really? And I think... Joe looked at Clara. I think maybe Thomas could help with something important. Not riding with the herd, but something else. What? The documentation, the letters. Joe turned back to Thomas. Your mama needs someone to help organize all the papers, make sure everything's written down proper. Someone she can trust. Thomas's face lit up. I can do that. I can write good, Mama taught me. Then that's your job, keeper of the records. Most important job there is. Clara watched her son straighten with pride, watched the fear in his eyes transform into purpose. Joe had done that, given Thomas something to hold on to when everything else was falling apart. All right, Clara said. Sarah rides with us. Thomas keeps the records. Emma watches the little ones. She looked at each of her children in turn. We're all going to fight, in our own ways, together. Together. Lily echoed, not entirely understanding, but wanting to be part of it. Together. Will agreed, his voice still weak, but determined. That night, after the children were asleep, Clara found Joe standing outside, staring up at the stars. The cold was brutal, but he didn't seem to notice. You gave Thomas something today, she said, coming to stand beside him. Something important. Just a job. More than that. You gave him a way to be part of this, to feel like he matters. Joe was quiet for a moment. I remember what it was like to feel useless when everything was falling apart. After my folks died, my brothers handled everything. I was just the kid in the way, more than helpful. He shook his head. Nobody should feel like that, especially not a child who's already lost so much. Clara slipped her hand into his. His fingers were cold, but they wrapped around hers gratefully. I'm scared, she admitted. Me too. What if this doesn't work? What if we lose everything anyway? Then we lose it fighting. Joe turned to face her. But Clara, even if the worst happens, we won't have lost everything. What do you mean? I mean, he struggled for words. Before you came, I was just surviving. Going through the motions, waiting to fail. Now I got something worth fighting for. People who depend on me. A family. Joe, I ain't saying it right. He pulled her closer. What I mean is, you and those kids, you already saved me. Whatever happens with the ranch with Blackwood, you gave me a reason to keep going. That's not nothing. Clara reached up and touched his face. When did you get so wise? Must be rubbing off from my wife. She laughed despite everything, despite the fear and the uncertainty and the impossible odds. We should go inside, she said. It's freezing. In a minute. Joe pulled her into his arms, holding her close against the cold. Just let me have this. 1 minute of peace before everything gets hard. They stood there together, two people who'd found each other at the worst possible time, and somehow made it work. The stars burned overhead, cold and distant. The future was uncertain. Tomorrow would bring challenges they couldn't predict. But for one moment, they had this. Each other. Hope. $3 and a whole lot of stubborn. The morning of the cattle drive, Blackwood came to the ranch. Clara saw him first, a figure on horseback emerging from the tree line, followed by 3 other riders. She felt her stomach drop. Joe. He was already moving, positioning himself between the approaching riders and the cabin where the children were. Stay behind me. I will not. Clara, please. She stayed, but she didn't hide. Blackwood reined in his horse a few feet from them. His smile was pleasant, but his eyes were cold. Tucker, Mrs. Tucker, I heard you've been busy. News travels fast. In a valley this small, everything travels fast. Blackwood's gaze swept over the ranch, the mended fences, the gathered cattle, the signs of preparation. Planning a trip, I see. That's our business. But you're making it everyone's business, aren't you? Riding around stirring up trouble, convincing good people to join your little crusade. Joe's hand moved toward his gun. Say what you came to say. I came to give you one last chance. Blackwood's voice hardened. Walk away. Take my offer. I'll even raise it to $1,000. Start fresh somewhere else. No one has to get hurt. And if we don't? Then things become unpleasant. Blackwood's eyes slid to Clara. For everyone. Joe stepped forward, his whole body tense. Are you threatening my wife? I'm stating facts. A cattle drive through mountain passes in winter. Dangerous territory. Things can happen. Accidents. His smile returned. Especially when there are children involved. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. He knew. He knew about Sarah planning to ride with them. You son of a... Joe reached for his gun. Joe, no. Clara grabbed his arm. That's what he wants. Listen to your wife, Tucker. She's smarter than you. Blackwood chuckled. Shoot me, and my men shoot you both. Then what happens to those 5 children inside? Clara's mind was racing. He was trying to provoke them, trying to give himself an excuse. But there had to be another way. Mr. Blackwood, she stepped forward, putting herself between the two men. You're a businessman. Let's talk business. Blackwood's eyebrows rose. Now that's interesting. You want this land for the water rights. That's your primary objective, correct? Among other things. Then let's negotiate. Give us 6 months. If we can't make the loan payment by then, we'll sell to you at your original offer, $500. Clara. Joe's voice was strangled. But, she continued, if we do make the payment, you leave us alone. Permanently. No more sabotage. No more price manipulation. No more threats. Blackwood studied her. You're offering me worse terms than I already have. In 3 months the bank forecloses, and I get the land for less. But that's uncertain. Banks can be unpredictable. Loans can be renegotiated. Things can change. Clara kept her voice steady. I'm offering you a guarantee. We fail, you win. Clean and simple. And if you succeed, then you've lost nothing but time. You've still got your empire. We've still got our tiny ranch. Everyone goes home. Blackwood was quiet for a long moment. Clara could feel Joe vibrating with tension beside her, could sense Blackwood's men waiting for a signal. You're interesting, Mrs. Tucker, Blackwood said finally. More interesting than your husband, certainly. Is that a yes? It's a maybe. He gathered his reins. 6 months. But understand this, if I even suspect you're going to the authorities, if I hear one word about federal marshals or territorial governors, the deal's off, and the consequences will be severe. Understood? I don't think you do understand. Not really. Blackwood's eyes went cold. I've spent 20 years building what I have. I won't let a $3 bride and a failing rancher take it away from me. He wheeled his horse and rode off, his men following. Clara watched them go, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it. What the hell was that? Joe's voice was barely controlled. Buying time. You just promised him the ranch. I promised him the ranch if we fail, and we're not going to fail. Clara turned to face him. He would have killed us, Joe. Right here, right now. Made it look like an accident. I saw it in his eyes. So you bargained our future. I saved our lives. Her voice cracked. I saved our children's lives. Because dead parents can't fight for anything. Joe stared at her. The anger slowly drained from his face. replaced by something else. Understanding, maybe. Or fear. You're right, he said quietly. You're right. I wasn't thinking. No, you were being brave. Stupid brave. Clara's legs felt weak. I love that about you, but it was going to get us killed. So what now? Now we do exactly what we planned. We round up the cattle, we drive them to Cheyenne, we sell them at fair market value. She took a breath. And we send those letters anyway. But you promised. I promised not to go to the authorities if he left us alone. He threatened our children, Joe. He's not going to leave us alone. Clara's jaw tightened. We just needed time. Now we have it. 6 months instead of 3. Joe shook his head slowly. You're terrifying, you know that. I learned from the best. She took his hand. 2 years of fighting alone. You learn to think fast. Clara Tucker, strategic genius. Clara Tucker, desperate mother who got lucky. She looked toward the cabin where 5 faces were pressed against the window watching. Let's get inside. We've got a cattle drive to plan. That night while the children slept, Clara wrote 3 letters. 1 to the territorial governor, 1 to the federal marshal's office, 1 to the Cheyenne newspaper. Each contained a summary of Blackwood's crimes, names of witnesses, dates and details carefully documented. She sealed them and gave them to Elena Santos, who would mail them from a town 50 miles away, far enough that Blackwood's spies wouldn't see. This is dangerous, Elena said. If he finds out, then we're no worse off than we were before. Clara's voice was steady. But if it works, if even one of those letters reaches someone who cares, it could change everything. You really believe that? I believe in trying. Sometimes that's all we have. Elena tucked the letters into her coat. You're braver than you know, Mrs. Tucker. I'm not brave. I'm terrified. That's the same thing. Elena smiled grimly. The brave ones are always terrified. They just don't let it stop them. Clara watched her ride off into the darkness, carrying letters that could save them or destroy them. She stood there until Elena disappeared from sight. Then she went inside to her family, to the man she loved, and the children who depended on her, to the impossible fight they'd chosen to wage. Tomorrow the cattle drive would begin. Tomorrow everything would change. But tonight they had each other. And that was enough. The cattle drive began at dawn. 32 head of cattle, 11 riders, 100 miles of frozen wilderness between them and Cheyenne. Clara sat astride her horse at the front of the column, Sarah beside her, watching the herd begin to move. You ready? Joe asked, pulling his horse alongside hers. No. Good. Neither am I. He almost smiled. Let's go save our future. The first day was brutal. The snow was deep, the cattle were skittish, and Clara's body screamed with every mile. She'd ridden before, but never like this, never for hours on end, never through drifts that reached the horses' bellies, never with so much riding on every step. By nightfall, they'd covered barely 15 miles. The riders made camp in a shallow valley, the cattle huddled together for warmth. Clara's legs shook so badly when she dismounted that Joe had to catch her. Easy. I'm fine. You're exhausted. We all are. She steadied herself against his shoulder. How's Sarah? Better than you, I reckon. Youth's got its advantages. Clara looked across the camp to where her daughter was helping Elena prepare food. Sarah moved with purpose, her face tired but determined. When had she grown up so much? She's amazing, Clara said quietly. Takes after her mama. She takes after herself. I just tried to get out of the way. That night, huddled around a small fire, Clara listened to the other ranchers talk. Stories emerged, stories of loss and struggle, of Blackwood's cruelty, of dreams, destroyed and rebuilt. These people had suffered, but they hadn't broken. My grandfather came to this territory with nothing but a wagon and a rifle. Thomas Gray said, his weathered face lit by firelight. Built his ranch from bare ground. My father expanded it. I was supposed to pass it to my children. His voice cracked. Blackwood took that from me. He tried to take it, Elena corrected. You're still here. We're all still here. For now. For now is all any of us have. Clara surprised herself by speaking. Every day we're still fighting is a victory. Every mile we cover is proof that he doesn't own us. Pretty words, Mrs. Tucker. They're not just words. Clara met Thomas Gray's eyes. I know what it feels like to lose everything. 2 years ago, I had a home, a husband, a future. I lost it all in one night. And I thought my life was over. But it wasn't. No, it wasn't. She looked around the fire at the faces watching her. It was the beginning of something else. Something harder, but more real. I found strength I didn't know I had. I found people who saw my value when I'd stopped seeing it myself. Her eyes found Joe's across the flames. I found love I'd stopped believing in. The camp was quiet. Snow fell softly around them, white and cold and strangely peaceful. So when I say we're still fighting, I mean it. Not because I'm naive, not because I think winning is guaranteed, but because fighting is the only way forward, and forward is the only direction that matters. Elena raised her cup. To fighting. To fighting, the others echoed. The second day brought worse weather. Wind howled across the open plains, driving snow into their faces, threatening to scatter the herd. Clara lost feeling in her fingers by mid-morning and didn't get it back until nightfall. But they kept moving, mile after mile, hour after hour. Sarah rode beside her mother without complaint, handling the cattle with a natural skill that made Clara's heart swell with pride. Mama? Sarah's voice was nearly lost in the wind. Yes, baby. When this is over, when we're safe, are you going to marry Mr. Joe? I mean, really marry him. Clara almost smiled. We're already married. You know what I mean. Like with a wedding and everything. Like you and Papa had. The mention of Robert sent a familiar pang through Clara's chest. But it was duller now, less sharp. Time and distance and love had done their work. Would you be all right with that? Clara asked. With me loving someone else? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Papa left us. He chose to leave. Mr. Joe stayed. He's choosing to stay every single day. Sarah? I'm not angry anymore, Mama. I was for a long time. But now I just feel sad. Sad that Papa couldn't see what he had. Sad that he missed watching us grow up. Sarah's voice was steady. I think if he could see us now, he'd want you to be happy. He wasn't strong enough to make you happy himself, but he'd want someone else to do it. Clara's eyes burned with tears that froze on her cheeks before they could fall. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. They rode on in silence. But something had shifted. Something had healed. On the third day, Blackwood's men found them. Clara spotted them first riders on the ridge above, silhouetted against the gray sky. 4 of them, maybe 5. Watching. Joe? I see them. What do we do? Keep moving. Don't show fear. The riders followed them for hours, maintaining distance, but never disappearing. Clara felt their eyes on her back like a physical weight. Every rustle, every shadow made her flinch. They're trying to scare us, Elena said, riding up beside Clara. Make us doubt. Turn back. Is it working? You tell me. Clara looked at the herd still moving forward. At the riders around her, tired but determined. At Joe, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on the horizon. No, she said. It's not working. That night, they posted guards. Joe took the first watch, and Clara couldn't sleep knowing he was out there in the dark alone. You should rest. Sarah's voice came from beside her. You'll need your strength tomorrow. I can't. Then at least lie down. Close your eyes. Clara tried. The ground was hard and cold beneath her bedroll. The wind bit through every layer of clothing. But eventually, exhaustion won out over fear, and she slept. She woke to gunfire. Clara was on her feet before she was fully conscious, her heart hammering. Around her, the camp erupted into chaos. Cattle were lowing in panic. Horses were screaming. People were shouting. "Sarah, Sarah!" "I'm here, Mama." Her daughter appeared out of the darkness, rifle in hand. "Where's Mr. Joe?" "I don't know." More shots. Clara couldn't tell who was shooting or from where. She grabbed Sarah's arm and pulled her behind a wagon. "Stay down." But the cattle, "Stay down." The gunfire stopped as suddenly as it had started. In the ringing silence that followed, Clara heard someone groan. "Joe." Her voice was hoarse. "Joe." "Here." His voice came from the edge of camp. "I'm okay, but Thomas is hit." Clara ran toward his voice, Sarah following despite orders. She found Joe kneeling beside Thomas Gray, pressing his hands against the older man's shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers. "How bad?" "Bad enough." Joe's face was grim. "Bullet went clean through, but he's losing blood. We need to stop and treat him. We stop, they win. That's what they want." Clara looked at Thomas Gray. His face was pale, his breathing shallow. But his eyes found hers, and she saw the same stubborn fire she'd seen in every rancher who'd joined them. "Keep moving," Thomas rasped. "Don't stop for me." "Mr. Gray, I didn't come this far to be the reason we fail." He grabbed Clara's hand with surprising strength. "You keep those cattle moving, Mrs. Tucker. You get them to Cheyenne. That's all that matters now." "We're not leaving you." "Didn't say leave me. Said keep moving." His grip tightened. "Elena knows field medicine. She'll patch me up, but the herd has to keep going." Clara looked at Joe. He nodded slowly. "He's right. We stop, we lose the cattle to cold or another attack. We have to keep pushing." "But I'll stay with Thomas," Elena said, appearing beside them. "Diego can take my place with the herd. You go, all of you." "Elena, I can't ask." "You're not asking. I'm telling." Elena's voice was fierce. "Go, save our ranches. Make this mean something." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to find another way, but there wasn't one. There never had been. "We'll send help back," she promised. "The moment we reach Cheyenne." "I know you will." Thomas Gray's eyes were closing. "Now go, before those bastards regroup." They moved out before dawn, leaving Elena and Thomas behind with 2 horses and enough supplies to survive a few days. The herd was smaller now. They'd lost 6 head to the chaos, but still substantial enough to make a difference. 26 cattle, 8 riders, 60 miles still to go. Clara rode beside Joe in silence. The weight of what they'd left behind pressed on her chest like a stone. "He'll be okay," Joe said quietly. "You don't know that." "No, but I believe it." He reached over and took her hand. "Same way I believe we're going to make it. Sometimes belief is all we have. And when belief isn't enough, then we fight until it is." They pushed hard that day, harder than before. The cattle were tired, the horses were tired, everyone was tired. But fear drove them forward. Fear of Blackwood's men returning, fear of losing everything they'd fought for. By nightfall, they'd covered 20 miles, the most they'd managed in a single day. 40 miles left, Joe said as they made camp. 2 days, maybe less if we push. Can we push that hard? We have to. Sarah came to sit beside Clara, leaning her head against her mother's shoulder. The girl was exhausted. They all were. Mama. Yes, baby. I'm glad I came. Clara wrapped her arm around her daughter. Me too. Even with everything that's happened. Especially with everything that's happened. Clara pressed a kiss to Sarah's hair. You showed me something these past few days. Something I'd forgotten. What? That I don't have to protect you from everything. that you're strong enough to face hard things and come out the other side. Clara's voice was thick. I spent so long trying to shield you from the world. I forgot that you need to learn to stand in it. Papa always said the world was cruel. It can be, but it can also be beautiful, and brave, and full of people worth fighting for. Clara looked around the camp at the ranchers who'd risked everything at Joe feeding the fire at the cattle that represented their last chance. Your papa only saw the cruelty. He couldn't see the rest. But you can. I'm learning to. Thanks to you. Thanks to all of you. The fourth day dawned clear and cold. No sign of Blackwood's men. Clara didn't know if they'd given up or were simply waiting for another chance, but she refused to let fear slow them down. They reached the outskirts of Cheyenne by mid-afternoon. The city rose out of the plains like a mirage, buildings and smoke, and the distant whistle of trains. We made it, Sarah breathed. Almost. Clara's eyes were scanning the horizon. Let's not celebrate until the cattle are sold and the money's in our hands. The stockyard was exactly as Clara had imagined: organized chaos, the smell of animals and money men shouting and bargaining. She found the buyer Joe had heard about, a man named Harrison who dealt with Chicago markets. 26 head, Harrison said, examining the cattle with a practiced eye. Good condition considering what they've been through. I heard about your drive. News travels. Can you give us a fair price? I can give you market price. $25 a head. Clara did the math quickly. $650. Enough to make a significant dent in their debt, but not enough to pay it off entirely. That's for these cattle, she said. But we represent 11 ranches. Combined, we could supply you with 100 head or more in the spring. Harrison's eyes lit up. 100 head? If you're willing to work with us, direct sale, fair prices, no middlemen. No middlemen meaning no local stockyards? Exactly. Harrison studied her. You're trying to bypass someone with local power. We're trying to survive. Same thing in my experience. Harrison smiled slowly. All right, Mrs. Tucker, $25 a head for these cattle and a contract for spring delivery at market rate. I'll even advance you a percentage as good faith. How much? Another 200? That's $850 total. Clara extended her hand. Deal. They shook, and Clara felt something shift in her chest. Not victory, not yet, but possibility. The ride back was faster without the cattle to manage. Clara pushed them hard, desperate to reach Elena and Thomas, to get home to her children, to see if their gamble had paid off. They found Elena and Thomas 2 days out from Bitter Creek. Thomas was weak but alive, his wound beginning to heal under Elena's careful attention. You did it, Thomas said when Clara told him about the sale. You actually did it. We all did it, together. No. Thomas shook his head. You. This was your plan, your determination. We just followed. Following takes courage too. Maybe. But leading takes more. Thomas's eyes were serious. Don't sell yourself short, Mrs. Tucker. What you've done, what you're doing, it's going to change this valley. I can feel it. They reached Bitter Creek in the early evening. Clara went straight to the bank, $850 in her pocket, determination in her heart. The new bank manager, Sykes, looked up when she walked in. His face went pale. Mrs. Tucker. Mr. Sykes. Clara placed the money on his desk. I'm here to make a payment on our loan. I don't understand. Mr. Blackwood said... I don't care what Mr. Blackwood said. Clara's voice was ice. This is $850. I want a receipt and I want a new payment schedule. We'll have the rest within 3 months. Sykes stared at the money like it might bite him. This is highly irregular. So is cutting fences during blizzards. So is shooting unarmed ranchers on cattle drives. So is systematically destroying everyone who stands in your employer's way. Clara leaned forward. The territorial governor has received a full accounting of Mr. Blackwood's activities. So has the federal marshal's office. So has every major newspaper in Wyoming. Sykes went even paler. You can't. I already have. Clara smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Now about that receipt. She walked out of the bank with documentation of their payment and a revised loan schedule that gave them 6 more months to pay the balance. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. Joe was waiting outside with Sarah. How'd it go? We're not saved yet, but we're not finished either. That's enough for now. They rode home as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. When the cabin came into view, small and weathered and absolutely perfect, Clara felt tears streaming down her face. Emma burst out the door before they'd even stopped Will and Lily right behind her. Thomas was at the window, his face breaking into a smile when he saw them. Mama, you're back!" Clara dismounted and caught her children in her arms, all of them at once holding on like she'd never let go. "We're back. We're home." "Did you do it? Did you save the ranch?" "We did." She looked at Joe over their heads. "All of us. Together." That night, after the children were fed and bathed, and finally blessedly asleep, Clara and Joe sat on the porch watching stars appear one by one. "I got a question," Joe said. "Go ahead. When this started, when I bid $3 on you in that saloon, did you ever think we'd end up here?" Clara laughed softly. "I thought you were crazy. I thought I was crazy for going along with it. I thought we'd both be dead by Christmas. And now I think—" She paused, searching for the right words. "I think sometimes the craziest things are the ones that save us. I think sometimes you have to bet everything on a stranger just to find out what you're made of." "And what are you made of, Clara Tucker?" "Same thing as you. Stubbornness and hope and a refusal to quit." She took his hand. "And love. More love than I thought I had left." Joe was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I want to marry you again." "We're already married." "Legally, yeah, but I want to do it right, in the church with the whole town watching. I want everyone to know that I didn't just buy a wife for $3. I found a partner, a family, everything I'd stopped believing I deserved." Clara's heart swelled. "Joe Tucker, are you proposing to me?" "I reckon I am." "Then I reckon I'm saying yes." He kissed her, then soft and sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, Clara was smiling. When? Spring. When the snow melts and the world starts over. Joe's eyes were bright. "We'll invite everyone, all the ranchers who stood with us, everyone in town who didn't bow to Blackwood. We'll show them what fighting for something looks like." And Blackwood. Blackwood's finished. He just doesn't know it yet. 2 weeks later, the federal marshal arrived in Bitter Creek. Clara watched from the general store as 3 men in long coats rode into town, their badges glinting in the winter sun. Behind her, Mrs. Miller let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be. Someone actually came. Someone had to eventually. Blackwood won't go quietly. No, he won't." The investigation took a month. The marshal interviewed every rancher who'd signed Clara's documents, examined bank records, traced patterns of fraud and intimidation that went back years. Blackwood's lawyers fought back, of course, but the evidence was overwhelming. In the end, Cornelius Blackwood was arrested on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to murder in the death of Miguel Santos. His assets were frozen. His businesses were seized. His empire crumbled overnight. "It's really over," Elena said, standing beside Clara as they watched Blackwood being led away in chains. "I never thought I'd see this day." "I didn't either. Not really." Clara's voice was quiet. "I just refused to accept any other outcome." "That's not the same thing." "Maybe not, but it got us here." The wedding happened in April, just as Joe had promised. The snow had melted, wildflowers were pushing through the mud, and the whole valley turned out to celebrate. Clara wore a dress Elena had helped her make, simple but beautiful white, with delicate embroidery at the collar. Her children stood beside her at the altar. Sarah holding Lily, Emma, bouncing with excitement, Thomas and Will looking uncomfortable, but proud in their borrowed suits, and Joe. Joe in his best clothes, his face clean-shaven, his eyes full of something that made Clara's heart stop. "We are gathered here today." Father McKenna began to witness something rare and precious. Clara heard the words, but she was looking at Joe. At the man who'd spent his last $3 on a stranger because he saw something in her worth saving. At the partner who'd stood beside her through blizzards and cattle drives and fights that should have been impossible to win. At the love she'd stopped believing in until she found it in the most unexpected place. "Do you, Clara Margaret Whitmore Tucker, take this man?" "I do." Father McKenna blinked. "I hadn't finished the question." "I know, but the answer's always going to be yes." Clara squeezed Joe's hands. "No matter what comes, no matter how hard it gets, yes." Joe's smile lit up his whole face. "I do too, in case anyone was wondering." The congregation laughed. Father McKenna shook his head, but couldn't hide his own smile. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Again." He gestured to Joe. "You may kiss your bride." Joe did, thoroughly. The cheers were deafening. Afterward, at the celebration that spilled out of the church and into the street, Clara found herself surrounded by well-wishers. Ranchers who'd fought beside them. Townspeople who'd quietly resisted Blackwood's influence. Even Mrs. Miller, her usual frown softened into something almost warm. "You did good," Mrs. Miller said, pressing Clara's hand. "Better than anyone expected." "I had help." "You had stubbornness. That's rarer than help." The older woman's eyes were suspiciously bright. "You reminded this town what fighting for something looks like. That's not nothing. It's not everything either." "No, but it's a start." Late that evening, after the last guests had gone and the children had finally collapsed into exhausted sleep, Clara and Joe stood on their porch. The stars blazed overhead, cold and eternal. "Someday," Joe said. "Someday. 3 months ago I was ready to give up, accept defeat. Let Blackwood take everything." He shook his head slowly. "Then you walked into my life. You paid $3 for me. Best investment I ever made." Clara laughed. "You keep saying that." "Because it keeps being true." Joe turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Clara Tucker, you saved me. Not just the ranch me. You reminded me that fighting was worth it. That hope wasn't just foolishness. That family." His voice cracked. "That family was something I could still have." "You saved me too," Clara whispered. "You looked at a woman with 5 children and more baggage than anyone could carry, and you saw something worth fighting for. I saw you. That's the same thing." They held each other in the darkness, two people who'd found something precious in the most unlikely circumstances. "What happens now?" Clara asked. "Now we build. We've got a ranch to run cattle to raise children to teach. We've got a whole future to figure out. Together. Together." Joe pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Always together." From inside the cabin, Clara heard one of the children stir. Lily probably having a dream. In a moment, she'd need to go check. In a moment, real life would resume with all its demands and complications. But right now, she had this. A man who loved her. Children who were safe and healthy and learning to hope again. A home that belonged to them, won through sacrifice and stubbornness and sheer refusal to quit. $3 and a leap of faith. It had been enough. It would always be enough. Because some things couldn't be measured in money. Some things, love, family, the courage to start over, were worth everything you had and more. Clara Tucker had learned that lesson the hard way, and she would never forget it.